Welcome to the Forge, my wanton wildlings. I'm your creepsmith, and I hope you like my work. There's an old show tune that says, "Don't fence me in." Human nature balks at imprisonment. It tears at our minds and turns us feral. How much worse would such an experience be when it happens for no reason, out of nowhere and at the clawed hands of a creature beyond your understanding? Tonight's story, The Thing That Stalks the Fields. Original author, unknown. It was a few weeks ago when the hay bales started creeping slowly away from the house. Every morning when I woke up, each one had moved a few hundred feet from where it had been before. I assumed it was pranksters with nothing better to do, and so I ignored it. Within a few days, though, the bales began to approach the boundaries of my farm. I was tired of the whole game by then and decided to move them back. It took a tedious hour to bring all of them from where they had been over to the barn again, and by the time I was done, I was ready to snap the neck of whatever little pissant was deciding to screw with me. The next morning, I found each and every one of my horses messily decapitated. It was the smell that woke me up. Each one was slumped over against the side of its stall. There were no signs of where the heads had gone. I spent the rest of the day cleaning up the mess and burying the remains. It was only when I was done that I noticed that the bales of hay had all returned to their positions from the day before, scattered out into the fields. This time though, I left them where they were. That night, I sat on my porch with my shotgun in hand, 2 pockets full of 12-gauge shells, and a pot of coffee on the table beside me. I sat for hours, straining my eyes into the field to catch a glimpse of who was moving my hay bales. Finally, I was beginning to nod off. I would have, but just as my eyes began to close, I heard a clamor and a rustling of trees from the nearby woods. I leaned forward, my heart racing with excitement. I was finally going to catch this bastard. I fumbled with my gun, fidgeted in my seat, waiting anxiously for whoever it was to get close enough to ambush. It was only when the thing actually got close enough for me to make out its silhouette in the dark that I froze. The thing that crept into my fields from the nearby woods didn't seem to notice me sitting there. It stalked, hunched, and deliberate through the field with the posture of a tiptoeing thief. If not for the fact that it must have towered over 10 feet tall, even in that crouched position, it might have seemed almost frail. The thinness of its arms and legs and the emaciated, caved-in quality of its chest reminded me of a starving animal. Still, this thing was undeniably strong, and I watched it hoist up each bale into its arms with ease and set it down carefully, easily a while away, taking only a few strides in between to cover the distance. I watched it work, moving each bale thoughtfully. Every once in a while it would straighten up and look around at the other bales and their positions in the field before adjusting the one it was working on ever so slightly. Before it left, it looked toward the house. I felt its eyes sweep over me in the dark, but whether it saw me or not, I couldn't tell. Then it turned silently and crept back the way it had come, disappearing into the dark of the woods. It took me an hour before I had the courage to move at all. I went inside after a while, but I didn't sleep that night. It was only when the sun rose that I dared step off my porch and into my fields. The hay bales were where it had left them. Strangely, It didn't move them as far as it had in previous days. They were approaching something invisible, and as I looked at them I realized they seemed to be marking some line. Indeed, as I walked around the house, I saw that they were in a distinct circle, formed with me and the house at the center. At first, I thought the bales were just being haphazardly moved away from the house, but now I could see that they were instead being moved to define some boundary. This thing was sending me a message. I slept uneasily that night, and only because I was exhausted. The next morning, the bales hadn't moved at all. They didn't move at all for the rest of the week, in fact. They were finally where the thing wanted them. I made myself sick trying to interpret all this. Why would this thing expend so much energy moving my hay bales and threaten me with such violence should I try to interfere with it? Killing my horses had been just that, a threat, and an intelligent threat at that. It knew that that would scare me, and it knew that I would understand the implications. The sound of an automobile working its way along the road to my farm one morning gave me a little rush of excitement. I'd been planning to abandon the farm since I had seen the thing, but I couldn't hope to leave on foot without risking it treating me like it had treated my horses. But if I could get in the car with whoever was coming my way, I might be able to escape before it could stop me. I didn't know or care who it was. I decided that the moment they stopped the car, I would jump in the passenger seat and tell them to get the hell out of there. But I never got the chance. The car worked its way slowly along the road, trundling across the uneven ground. I urged it silently in my mind to hurry. It was when it passed between the two bales placed on either side of the road that I began to hear a booming clatter from the woods. The thing burst suddenly from between the trees, charging on all four of its terrible gangly limbs toward the car. Within a few seconds, it was there, pouncing on the automobile like a predatory cat. Within moments, it was peeling the vehicle's steel frame apart, working to get at the driver. The man, whoever he was screaming all the while, and I could hear him even over the crunching of metal and the shattering of glass. It was only when the thing crushed him carelessly in its hand that the screaming stopped. It tossed away his body and straightened up to look at me once again. In the sunlight, I could see the inhumanity of the thing. It was composed entirely of something awful and alive, which was lashed together in a messy semblance of the human form. Whatever it was made of looked so polished and hard that if it weren't for the minute writhing of the stuff, I'd think that it was made of granite. It then retreated back into the woods, and I was left to my shock. My eyes wandered again to where the car sat, the engine still sputtering, between two of the hay bales. And suddenly, I understood. The message was clear. I am this thing's captive, and I am not allowed visitors. Nothing may cross the borders it has set. I'm trapped here by the thing that stalks the fields. And it demands nothing except that I never leave. Still, I don't know if I can handle being that thing's canary. I've been thinking hard for the last few days since I saw it crush that man's chest, silencing him before he could finish his scream. If I cross that hay bale border, it'll probably do the same. It'd smash my skull before I could put up my hands to protect myself. It'd go and find a new pet, and probably keep looking until it found someone who could stand knowing that it was waiting just outside, watching at all hours of the day with its shiny insect eyes. I've been thinking hard for the last few days, and I might just make a run for it. Ouch. Now maybe that's not the wisest way to get your freedom back, but I can't say that I don't empathize. Threats from a monstrous tormentor can drive you to all sorts of horrible decisions. Just ask my wife. Here's hoping you never find yourself having to make that choice. Stay scary, my wildlings, and make the most of your nights.